You paid for me, now do it, the rancher did, and suddenly he had a wife. It was a quiet morning on the edge of the vast open plains where the sun rose slowly over the distant hills, casting long shadows over the ranch. The air smelled faintly of hay, dirt, and the crisp scent of early morning dew. The rancher, a man named Henry, was already outside, moving steadily among the livestock. He was a tall man, with broad shoulders that spoke of years of hard work, and a face weathered by the sun and wind. Desperation. His hands were rough but strong, and every movement he made seemed deliberate, like someone who had spent a lifetime understanding the land and the creatures that depended on it. Henry had lived on this ranch for more than 20 years. It was his inheritance, his responsibility, and in many ways his only family. He was known in the small town nearby as quiet, dependable, and serious. But people rarely saw him without a hat shading his eyes, and his words were usually few, but when he spoke, everyone listened. Life on the ranch was not easy, and Henry had learned to trust only himself.
He liked it that way. That morning, however, was different.
A new presence had arrived on the ranch, and Henry could feel it even before he saw her. A young woman had come to work there, someone sent by the town's labor agency to help with chores, but something about her made Henry uneasy. Perhaps it was her boldness, the way she moved as if she owned the space she entered. Or maybe it was her eyes, bright, alert, and unafraid of him.
Her name was Clara.
She had come from a distant town, seeking work to pay off debts her family could not manage. Life had not been easy for her, and yet she carried herself with a confidence that most people lacked. She was tall and slender, with dark hair pulled back in a simple braid, and her clothes were practical but clean. She looked like someone who had learned to survive through cleverness and courage, rather than relying on anyone else. Henry watched her from a distance as she began to inspect the stables and the fields. She moved quickly, efficiently, but with a certain curiosity, stopping now and then to observe the animals or check the fences.
Henry felt a flicker of something he had not felt in a long time. Interest.
He reminded himself to stay cautious. Outsiders were unpredictable, and the ranch had already seen too many people come and go. Most left after a few weeks, discouraged by the hard work or the isolation. Clara noticed him watching and gave a small nod, not timidly, but as if acknowledging an equal. Henry felt a little surprise. She did not look intimidated, and somehow that unsettled him. He had spent years being the one in control, the one everyone depended on, and yet here was someone who seemed to challenge him without saying a word. The day moved slowly. Clara followed instructions but also asked questions, small, practical questions about the ranch, the animals, the schedules. At first, Henry answered tersely, only giving her what she needed to know. But as the morning went on, he began to see that she genuinely wanted to learn, not just work. She had a spark that reminded him of the younger days when he himself had struggled to understand the rhythms of the land. During lunch, she finally spoke a sentence that made him blink in surprise. They were sitting under a large oak tree, the animals resting in the shade nearby, and she looked at him seriously.
You paid for me! Now do it! She said, her tone half teasing, half daring.
Henry froze. For a moment he was unsure what she meant. Did she expect him to do some favor, or was she making fun of him? Her eyes, however, were steady, and there was no malice in them. It was as if she was testing him, seeing how he would react. Henry let out a small, almost inaudible laugh. He had not been spoken to like that in years. Most people either respected his silence or ignored him altogether. Here was someone, a stranger, telling him what to do, yet not in an angry way. There was something almost playful about it, though he tried not to show it. He decided to respond cautiously. "Do what?" he asked, raising one eyebrow. Clara smiled faintly, a hint of mischief in her eyes. "Whatever it is I need. I can't manage it alone. And since you've paid the agency for my placement, well, I figure it's your responsibility now.
Henry felt a mix of emotions.
Repetition, irritation, and a strange curiosity. He had never dealt with someone like her before. Perhaps. Normally people obeyed him quietly, but Clara did not intend to obey. She expected a conversation, a negotiation, and that was new to him. I don't know if I can do everything you expect.
He said carefully, trying to gauge her reaction. She shrugged.
Then try what you can. I'm not afraid to work, and I'm not afraid to ask for help. The rest of the day passed in a mix of tension and silent understanding. Henry assigned her tasks, but he did so with an unusual attentiveness. He noticed how she handled the animals, how she managed the tools, and how she moved through the wide spaces of the ranch. She was capable, smart, and surprisingly thoughtful. By evening, when the sky turned golden and the animals settled down, Henry found himself sitting quietly on the porch, watching her finish a task by the barn. He could not deny that her presence had changed the rhythm of the ranch, and in ways he did not yet understand, it had changed him too. Clara, on her part, seemed unbothered by his watchful eyes. She worked steadily, speaking only when necessary, but there was a confidence about her that Henry could not ignore. She had survived hardships he could not even imagine, and yet she arrived at this unfamiliar place with courage and humor intact. That combination both intrigued and unsettled him. When night fell, Henry went inside the house, a modest structure of wood and stone, and sat in his chair by the fireplace. He thought about Clara's words, the audacious, challenging line she had spoken that morning. "You paid for me. Now do it." At first, it had sounded like a joke, or perhaps an impossible request, but as he replayed the day in his mind, he realized it was more than that. It was a statement of independence, of trust, and, strangely, a kind of invitation. Henry had lived a life of predictability, of routines and responsibilities, drowned in despair. Yet Clara's arrival had stirred something he had long suppressed, a curiosity about connection, about companionship, about what it meant to let someone in.
He pushed the thought aside.
He was the rancher. He had work to do, animals to care for, land to protect. Emotions could wait. Still, he could not deny that Clara's presence lingered in his mind. Her laughter as she handled the animals, the sharp intelligence in her eyes, the way she did not flinch under his scrutiny. It was all new, all challenging, and all. And so, the ranch settled into an uneasy balance that night. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees and over the fields, carrying with it the promise of a new day, of hard work and unexpected surprises. Inside, Henry sat quietly, realizing that his life, steady, predictable, and solitary, was about to change in ways he had never imagined. For the first time in many years, he felt a flicker of anticipation. Not for a task, not for the weather, not for the crops or the animals, but for the presence of a woman who had arrived with a single bold line, and somehow, without meaning to, had begun to rewrite the rules of his life. Morning sun rose again over the ranch, painting the fields in soft gold. Henry was already up, walking along the fence line, inspecting the crops and the livestock. He had spent many years waking before sunrise, and the rhythm of the ranch had become second nature to him. Yet today, there was something different. Clara was already awake, moving quickly around the barn, humming a light tune as she worked. Henry paused for a moment, watching her. She moved with purpose, but there was a natural ease in her movements that made even hard work look almost graceful. Clara noticed him and smiled. "Morning," she called cheerfully. Her voice carried over the fields, fresh and bright, and Henry felt a strange warmth at hearing it. It was unusual for him to feel anything but duty and routine in the morning. "Morning," he replied, nodding. "Bay." His voice was gruff but not unkind. He reminded himself to focus on the day's work, yet he found his eyes drifting toward her more than once. Today, Clara had a list of chores to complete, and Henry decided to work alongside her. Normally, he preferred to handle the more difficult tasks himself, leaving the lighter work to others. But something about Clara made him curious. Perhaps it was her confidence, or perhaps it was her persistence. The way she did not shy away from a challenge, even when it was clear she was still learning the ways of the ranch. They began with the stables. Henry showed Clara how to check the horse's hooves carefully, explaining the importance of noticing small changes that could indicate discomfort or injury. Clara listened attentively, nodding, and then tried it herself. She struggled at first, as the horses were large and sometimes nervous, but she did not give up. Henry watched her, offering quiet guidance but never taking over. "You're patient," she said suddenly, looking up at him. "Most people would just scold the horses or push me aside." Henry shrugged. "Patience comes with practice. You learn to listen to the animals, to the land, to what's happening around you. You can't rush it." Clara smiled, thoughtfully, as if considering his words. "I think I like that about this place. It's honest. You can't pretend out here. You have to work for it." Henry felt a flicker of respect. Most newcomers would complain about the hard work or the long hours, but Clara seemed to understand it. She had come prepared to face the reality of ranch life, not just to earn a paycheck. After finishing with the horses, they moved to the cattle pens. Here, Clara's strength and determination became more evident. Breath. She lifted heavy bales of hay and moved them carefully to the feeding area, wiping sweat from her brow, but never showing signs of frustration. Henry worked alongside her, and though he did not often speak, he found himself explaining small tips: how to position the hay to prevent waste, how to watch the cattle for signs of illness, and how to maintain calm around the more stubborn animals. As they worked, Clara began to ask more questions, some practical and some curious. "How did you learn all this?" she asked at one point, as she brushed down a horse. Henry thought for a moment. "My father taught me, and then the ranch taught me the rest." "You never stop learning when you live like this. Every day brings something new." Clara nodded, her eyes bright. "I guess I'm going to learn a lot then." Henry allowed himself a small smile. There was something refreshing about her attitude. She did not complain. She did not expect everything to be easy, and she seemed genuinely interested in understanding the ranch, not just completing tasks. By mid-morning, the sun was high and the air was warm. They took a short break under the shade of a large oak tree. Clara pulled a small cloth from her bag and wiped her face, then handed Henry a bottle of water. "Brats! Here! You've been working just as hard," she said. Henry hesitated, then accepted it. "Thank you," he said simply. It was rare for anyone to consider his needs, as he usually focused on others or the work itself. They sat in silence for a few moments, listening to the sounds of the ranch, the lowing of cattle, the distant clatter of hooves, the wind rustling through the grass. It was a peaceful, almost meditative time, and Henry realized that having someone to share it with, even quietly, made it feel richer. Clara broke the silence. "Do you ever get lonely out here?" she asked. Henry thought carefully before answering. "Sometimes. But you learn to keep busy. The land doesn't stop for loneliness." She smiled softly, understanding more than she let on. "I think I'd like the quiet." Maybe it helps you notice things you'd miss otherwise. Henry looked at her, surprised by her insight. Most people didn't notice the small details, the subtle changes in the animals, the land, or the weather. Clara's awareness was sharp, and he found it both comforting and impressive. The rest of the day passed in a rhythm that was both exhausting and satisfying. Clara worked diligently, and Henry gradually began to give her more responsibility. P observed how she handled unexpected problems, like a calf that refused to follow the herd, or a fence that had partially collapsed. Clara approached each challenge thoughtfully, sometimes hesitating, sometimes improvising, but always learning. Inspiration for her grew quietly, and he began to see her not just as help, but as someone capable of partnership. By late afternoon, they had finished most of the chores, and the ranch began to settle into its evening routine.
Henry was about to dismiss Clara for the day when she turned to him with a serious expression. "I want to learn everything," she said firmly.
I don't want to just follow instructions. I want to understand the ranch, the animals, everything.
Henry studied her for a long moment.
He was used to giving orders, not teaching someone so thoroughly. Yet there was no arrogance in her request, only genuine curiosity and determination. "You're ambitious," he said. "I want to be able to do this right," she replied. "Not just for you, for me too." Henry felt a small warmth in his chest. Most people would have left or complained by now, but Clara had stayed, and she wanted to grow, not just work. There was something admirable about that. "Very well," he said finally. "Then I'll teach you. But be warned, you have to work hard. The ranch doesn't forgive mistakes easily." Clara grinned. "I'm ready." That evening, after Clara had finished her tasks and returned to the small cabin assigned to her, Henry sat alone on the porch. He thought about her words, her determination, and the spark in her eyes. Brave, clever, and fearless in a way that made him both proud, and fearless in a way that made him both proud and uneasy. He had expected to train her, to show her the ways of the ranch, but he realized he was learning from her too. Over the next few days, the pattern settled in. Clara worked hard, asked questions, and gradually gained confidence. Henry continued to guide her, sometimes silently watching, sometimes giving careful instructions. Their relationship began to shift, not formally, not even consciously, but naturally. Mutual respect was forming along with a subtle understanding that they could rely on each other. One afternoon, a minor crisis arose. A young foal had gotten tangled in the fence, and Henry had been called away briefly. Clara rushed to help, carefully untangling the animal while keeping it calm. When Henry returned, he found her crouched beside the foal, sweat on her brow, but smiling. "It's okay," she said.
"I've got him." Henry felt a rush of respect and relief.
Bed. She had handled the situation with skill and calm, showing not only courage, but intuition. "You did well," he said quietly. She looked up at him, and for a brief moment they shared a silent acknowledgement of trust. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the fields in soft orange light, Henry realized something he had not expected. The ranch, once quiet and solitary, now felt alive in a different way. It wasn't just the animals or the land. It was Clara. Her presence brought a new energy, a new perspective, and, quietly, a sense of companionship that Henry had long denied himself. Clara, too, felt the change. The ranch was no longer just a place of work. It was a place where she belonged, where her efforts mattered, and where she was slowly becoming part of something bigger than herself. She respected Henry, not just as her employer, but as someone wise and capable, someone who valued hard work and integrity. And she had begun to care, in ways she did not yet fully understand, about the man who had initially seemed so distant but was now slowly opening to her presence. That night, as the stars appeared in the clear sky and the ranch settled into quiet, Henry and Clara each lay in their separate spaces, thinking about the day. There was a shared sense of anticipation, a feeling that something new and unexpected was beginning. But they did not speak of it aloud, but it lingered in the air between them, a promise of challenges, growth, and perhaps something more. For Henry, it was the start of learning to trust again. For Clara, it was the start of finding a place she could call home. And for the ranch itself, it was the start of a new rhythm, one shaped not only by hard work but by the quiet understanding and growing connection between a man and a woman who had met under unusual circumstances and were now discovering the possibilities of life together. The days on the ranch continued in their steady rhythm, each sunrise bringing the promise of work, each sunset the quiet relief of accomplishment. Henry and Clara had settled into a routine. Clara was no longer just a helper. She had begun to understand the rhythms of the ranch, the moods of the animals, and the unspoken patterns of life that Henry had known for years. Henry, in turn, had begun to notice things he had not considered before, the way she anticipated problems before they arose, how she handled the animals with patience, and how she seemed to bring a lightness to even the hardest days. One morning, as the sun was rising behind the distant hills, Clara arrived at the barn earlier than usual. She had noticed that one of the cows had been restless the night before, pacing near the fence. Henry had planned to check on it later, but Clara was already there, observing the animal. "Good morning," Henry said as he approached. His voice carried over the field, calm but filled with the faintest hint of surprise. Clara looked up and smiled. "Morning. I thought I should check on Daisy. She seemed uneasy last night." Henry studied her for a moment, impressed by her initiative. "You've got a good eye," he said. "Most people wouldn't notice that." Clara shrugged. "I'm learning. I like noticing things. It feels like paying attention keeps the ranch alive."
Henry nodded, feeling a quiet respect for her.
She was right. Life on the ranch was not just about work. It was about understanding, observation, and timing, and Clara was learning that quickly. That day, the ranch faced an unexpected challenge. A sudden storm had been forecasted, and clouds rolled in thick and heavy over the plains. The wind picked up, carrying with it the smell of rain and the distant sound of thunder. Henry knew the storm could damage fences, upset the animals, and even cause injury if precautions were not taken. He immediately set to work securing the barn doors and tying down loose equipment. Clara was at his side, moving quickly and efficiently, following his instructions without complaint. Brought the animals to safe areas and made sure everything that could be damaged was protected.
The storm arrived sooner than expected, and heavy rain began to fall, drumming on the tin roofs and soaking the fields.
The wind howled, and Henry felt a pang of worry as he thought about the animals in the open pastures.
"We need to make sure the calves are safe," he said, turning to Clara.
Clara nodded.
"I'll help you."
"We can do this together." They ran through the rain, mud splashing under their boots, pulling the calves closer to shelter and calming the anxious animals. The storm raged around them, and for a moment, Henry allowed himself to feel the fear he usually kept buried. It was not the storm itself, but the responsibility of the ranch, the animals, and the trust he had come to place in Clara. Perhaps. They paused under the shelter of a large oak tree, drenched but relieved. Clara laughed, a bright sound that cut through the lingering tension. "Well, that was exciting," she said, shaking the rain from her hair. Henry could not help but smile despite the exhaustion. "You handled yourself well," he said.
"Better than I expected."
Clara looked at him, her eyes reflecting both the rain and the satisfaction of having completed a difficult task.
I had a good teacher, she said simply. Henry felt a strange warmth at her words.
That he had never thought of himself as a teacher, but seeing her learn, adapt, and succeed brought him a quiet pride. He realized that this partnership, born from a casual comment and a little audacity, was becoming something more meaningful. The following weeks were a mixture of work, learning, and subtle companionship. They shared meals, exchanged stories of their pasts, and began to understand each other in ways that words alone could not express. Henry found himself opening up about the ranch's history, the challenges he had faced, and the quiet dreams he had long buried. Both. Clara listened, not with judgment, but with genuine interest, occasionally sharing her own experiences and the hardships she had overcome. One evening, after a long day in the fields, Henry and Clara sat on the porch of the main house. The air was warm, carrying the scent of fresh hay and wet earth from the afternoon rain. Clara broke the silence first. "Do you ever wonder what life would have been like if you hadn't stayed on the ranch?" she asked softly. Henry thought for a moment, watching the colors of the sunset reflect on the fields. Sometimes. But this is where I belong. The land, the animals, it's all I know." Clara nodded, her eyes thoughtful.
I think I understand that. I've moved around a lot, never really having a place to call home.
But here, with you and the ranch, it feels different. It feels rest, steady. Henry felt a small, quiet happiness at her words. For the first time in years, he realized he was not alone in his work, in his life, or in his thoughts. Clara had become more than a helper. She had become a companion, someone who could share both the burdens and the small joys of life on the ranch. Then came a day that tested both of them in a way they had not anticipated. A young calf had wandered off during the night, and despite their precautions, it had ended up stuck near a creek. Henry and Clara discovered it early in the morning, just as the sun was rising. The calf was frightened, trapped by the water and mud, and struggling to free itself.
Henry quickly assessed the situation. "We need to calm it and guide it back to the pasture," he said, looking at Clara.
Breaths. Clara nodded, rolling up her sleeves. "Let's do it together." They moved carefully, speaking in calm tones to the animal, guiding it step by step out of the water. Henry held one side while Clara gently encouraged the calf from the other. The mud made their boots heavy, and the water soaked their clothes, but they persevered. After tense moments, the calf was finally safe, trembling but unharmed. Henry looked at Clara, admiration in his eyes. "You stayed calm the whole time. Most people would have panicked."
Clara smiled a little sheepishly.
"I guess I just didn't want to fail." Henry shook his head, feeling a warmth in his chest.
She had proven herself not just capable, but courageous and reliable.
It was moments like these, small yet significant, that made him see her not just as help, but as an equal, someone who could face challenges side by side with him. The experience brought them closer, not through words, but through shared action. They learned to trust each other in ways that went beyond the routine of daily work. Every task, every challenge, every quiet moment of reflection became part of the foundation of a growing bond. One evening after finishing chores, Clara sat on the porch steps brushing the dust from her clothes. Henry joined her, leaning against the railing. For a while, they watched the horizon in silence, the air filled with the soft sounds of the ranch, settling for the night. "You know," Clara said after a while, "I never thought I'd find a place like this. I thought I'd always be moving, always searching for work, always looking for something I couldn't even name."
Henry glanced at her, curious.
"And now?" Clara smiled, a quiet, genuine smile that seemed to light up her entire face. "Now, I think I've found it. Not just the ranch, but a home. Maybe even more than that. Henry felt a lump in his throat. He had spent so many years alone, believing that the ranch and the work were all he needed. But Clara's words, her presence, her courage, were slowly showing him that life could be more than survival. It could be companionship, understanding, and even quiet joy. But days continued, each one bringing new lessons, new challenges, and new moments of connection.
They worked together, laughed together, and occasionally disagreed, but through it all, they learned to rely on each other.
Clara's presence was no longer just a convenience. It was essential. And Henry, who had once prided himself on independence, found that he valued her more than he had anticipated. By the end of the 3rd month, the ranch had become a place of growth not just for the animals and the land, but for the two people who had come together under unusual circumstances. The bond between Henry and Clara was no longer defined by debt or obligation, but by respect, trust, and a quiet understanding that had begun to grow into something deeper. As they sat one evening watching the stars appear one by one in the clear sky, Henry realized that the storm, the challenges, and the long days had all led to this moment. Clara was no longer just the helper he had expected her to be. She was a partner, a companion, and perhaps in ways neither of them fully understood, something more. For Clara, the realization was equally profound. She had come to the ranch to work, to earn her way, and to find stability. Instead, she had found a place where she belonged, a man she respected, and a life that promised more than she had ever imagined. The ranch, once a place of solitude and routine, had become a landscape of possibility shaped by hard work, shared effort, and the quiet growing connection between two people learning to trust and care for each other. The seasons began to change, and with them, the rhythm of the ranch shifted. Summer's heat gave way to cooler breezes, and the mornings were tinged with a crispness that spoke of fall. The work on the ranch remained constant, yet Henry and Clara had settled into a deeper understanding of each other. Their partnership had grown beyond chores and tasks. It was built on shared respect, trust, and the quiet joy of having someone who truly understood the rhythm of life on the land. One morning, Henry found Clara already out in the field before sunrise. She was checking the fences along the northern pasture, her movements careful and deliberate. Her hair, tied back in a braid, caught the first light of the sun, and for a moment, Henry paused to watch her. She was strong, capable, and focused, yet there was a softness in the way she moved, a gentle attention to the animals and the land that reminded him of the careful balance life required.
"Morning," Clara replied, looking up with a small smile. "I thought I'd check these fences before the cattle start moving around."
One of them looked restless last night. Henry nodded, impressed by her initiative. "Good thinking. Let's take a look together."
As they worked side by side, securing loose boards and checking the fence lines, a quiet rhythm settled between them. They spoke little, but their communication was almost instinctive.
A glance, a gesture, or a shift in weight was enough to coordinate their movements. It was a kind of understanding that could only come from shared experience and growing trust. After finishing the northern pasture, Henry suggested they take a break under the large oak tree near the barn. Clara accepted, and they sat in the shade, listening to the soft rustle of leaves and the distant lowing of cattle. Clara pulled out a small notebook and began jotting down notes about the animals and the land. "You're organized," Henry said, curiosity in his tone.
Clara looked up and laughed lightly. I like to keep track of things.
It helps me notice patterns, remember what works, and plan for problems before they happen."
Henry nodded thoughtfully. "You've got a good mind for this."
"Most people wouldn't take the time to do what you're doing. They just follow instructions." Breaths. Clara smiled softly, her eyes reflecting the sunlight. "I don't want to just follow instructions. I want to understand why things are done a certain way. It feels important to know the reasons behind the work. Henry felt a quiet admiration for her. She had come to the ranch as an outsider, expecting only to work, and now she was learning to think like someone who truly belonged. He realized that she was not just learning from him, he was learning from her, too. Her curiosity, her determination, and her courage were reminding him why he had chosen this life in the first place. The satisfaction of mastery, the care of living things, and the rewards of patience. As the morning turned into afternoon, a messenger arrived from the town. A neighbor had called, saying that Henry's distant cousin, who owned a small but important piece of farmland nearby, was ill and needed someone to check on the property. Henry knew this would require a day-long trip, and the thought of leaving the ranch unattended made him uneasy. Clara noticed his hesitation. "I can handle things here while you're gone," she said confidently. "I know the routines, the animals, and the land. You can trust me." Henry studied her, considering the offer. She had proven herself capable in countless small tasks, but this was the first time he had to trust her with full responsibility for the ranch. After a long moment, he nodded. "All right. I'll be gone most of the day. Take care of everything, and don't hesitate to call if anything seems wrong."
Clara smiled. "You don't need to worry."
I've got this." Henry left, and Clara immediately took charge. She checked each animal, ensured the feed was properly distributed, and inspected the fences one more time. Throughout the day, she encountered challenges. A stubborn horse refusing to enter the barn, a gate that had sprung loose, and a sudden rain shower that threatened to flood the pens. Dad Tao was not in despair. She handled each situation calmly, using both the knowledge Henry had taught her and her own growing intuition. By the time Henry returned in the late afternoon, the ranch was in perfect order. Clara met him at the gate, her hands still slightly muddy but her posture confident. "You did well," Henry said, a rare smile breaking across his face.
Everything's in order. I couldn't ask for better. Clara felt a warm satisfaction.
Breaths. "I wanted to make sure I could handle it. For the ranch, for you, and for myself." Henry looked at her, realizing in that moment how much she had become a part of the ranch, and more importantly, how much she had become a part of his life. He had always been cautious with trust and closeness, but Clara had shown him that partnership could be real, reliable, and even comforting. Over the next few weeks, their bond continued to deepen. They shared stories from their pasts, laughed at small mistakes, and celebrated successes together.
Henry began to notice the little things, how Clara would remember each animal's habits, how she anticipated problems before they arose, and how she had begun to care for the ranch as if it were her own.
One evening, after a long day of work, Henry and Clara were sitting by the fireplace in the main house. The fire crackled softly, casting a warm glow across the room. Clara had prepared a simple meal, and they ate quietly, enjoying the comfort of shared labor and quiet companionship. After a while, Clara spoke softly. "Henry, do you ever think about the future?" Henry paused, considering her question. "I suppose I have," he said carefully. "But the future has always been tied to the ranch. I've never thought much beyond it." Clara looked at him, her eyes thoughtful.
I think about it a lot.
"I've moved around so much, never really having a place to call home. But here, with you, with the ranch, it feels different. It feels like maybe the future could be something more." Henry felt a lump in his throat. Her words were simple, yet filled with meaning. For years, he had focused only on survival and duty, never imagining that life could hold more than work and routine. Yet Clara's presence had shown him that companionship, trust, and perhaps even love were possible. He reached out, placing a hand gently over hers. "Clara, I've never had anyone like you here." You've changed things, more than you might realize. Breath. Clara's eyes softened. I didn't come here to change things.
I came here to work, to learn, to find a place where I could belong. But maybe we've changed each other.
The realization hung between them, unspoken but understood. They were no longer simply employer and worker, teacher and student, or stranger and newcomer. They were partners, in every sense of the word, connected by shared effort, trust, and growing affection. A few days later, the town held a small fair, and Henry reluctantly agreed to take a short break from the ranch to attend. Breath. Clara joined him, and together they walked through the rows of stalls, watching children play, listening to music, and enjoying the simple pleasures of community life. It was there, amid the laughter and light, that Henry felt a new clarity. He had spent so many years focused only on work, on duty, and on keeping himself closed off. But Clara had opened a door he had long ignored, showing him that life could hold joy, trust, and perhaps even love. He took a deep breath and looked at her. Clara, there's something I need to tell you. Clara turned to him, curiosity in her eyes. What is it?
Henry hesitated, unsure of how to put his feelings into words.
I don't want to just work with you or teach you, or even just have you here at the ranch. I want more. I want us to be partners in everything. In the ranch, in life, if you'll have me. Clara's eyes widened, and for a moment silence stretched between them. Then, slowly, a smile spread across her face. Henry.
I've been hoping you'd say that. I've felt the same way for a long time.
Breath. Relief, joy, and a quiet sense of certainty filled him. They had faced storms, challenges, and long days together, and now they could face the future side by side, not just as companions in work, but as partners in life. Returning to the ranch that evening, they walked together through the fields, the sun setting behind them. The land, the animals, and the quiet rhythms of daily life seemed brighter, fuller, and more meaningful. For the first time, Henry allowed himself to imagine a future that included not only the ranch but Clara, and all the possibilities that life might bring. In the weeks that followed, they made plans, not just for the ranch, but for themselves. They discussed improvements, new projects, and ways to strengthen the farm. But more importantly, they talked about what it meant to be together, to share responsibilities, joys, and challenges. Their bond, once built on work and trust, had grown into something deeper. Mutual respect, affection, and a quiet, enduring love. The ranch, once a place of solitude and routine, had become a home filled with laughter, companionship, and the promise of a shared future. And Henry and Clara, who had met under unusual circumstances and tested each other through work and life, had discovered that true partnership, like the land itself, required patience, care, and a willingness to grow together. The ranch had settled into a steady rhythm, but something had shifted. The land, the animals, and even the quiet mornings seemed fuller, warmer, and more alive. Henry and Clara had become inseparable, not just in their work, but in their lives. Every task, every challenge, every quiet moment was now shared, and with it came a sense of connection that neither of them had expected when Clara had first arrived. It was early spring, and the first hints of new life were appearing in the fields. The grass was growing greener, buds were forming on the trees, and the animals seemed lighter, almost joyful, after the long winter. Henry walked alongside Clara as they inspected the fences and the newly planted crops. The air was crisp but not cold, carrying the scent of fresh soil and new beginnings. Brace. You know, Clara said, glancing at him with a soft smile, I think this is the happiest I've ever been. Henry felt a warmth in his chest. Me too, he admitted. I never imagined it would be like this. I thought I could only live through work and routine, but... This us. It's different. Better. Clara laughed lightly, a sound that Henry had come to associate with comfort and home. "I didn't come here looking for anything like this," she said. "I just wanted a place to work and survive. But somehow, I found more than that. I found a home. And maybe even more than a home." Henry stopped walking and looked at her seriously. "Clara, I've been thinking. We've worked together, laughed together, faced challenges together, and through it all, I've realized something important. I don't want to imagine my life without you. I don't want this partnership to be just about the ranch. I want it to be about everything, our life, our future, and what we build together." Clara's eyes softened, and she took his hand gently. "Henry, I feel the same way. I've never felt like I truly belonged anywhere, but here with you, I finally do, Britt. I want us to face the future together, no matter what it brings." For a long moment they stood together in silence, holding hands, listening to the gentle sounds of the ranch around them. It was not a dramatic declaration, not a sudden rush of passion, but a quiet, steady understanding, an unspoken promise of loyalty, trust, and love.
Over the next few days, they began planning their life together in a more deliberate way.
They talked about improvements for the ranch, ways to care for the animals more efficiently, and projects that could help the land thrive. They discussed routines, schedules, and responsibilities, ensuring that their shared life would be balanced and fair. Yet, amid these practical matters, there was laughter, small joys, and a growing sense of unity that made every discussion feel like an affirmation of their bond. One afternoon, a local neighbor came by with a small gift, a handcrafted bench made of oak. "Thought this might be nice for the porch," the neighbor said with a wink. "Two of you working so hard deserves a place to sit and enjoy the evening." Henry and Clara placed the bench together on the porch, side by side. As they sat down, the wind rustled the leaves of the trees, and the animals grazed peacefully nearby.
It was a simple moment, yet it carried a profound significance.
Say we're partners in every sense, sharing the joys, responsibilities, and quiet pleasures of life. That evening, after the chores were done and the animals settled, Henry prepared a small fire in the yard. The sky was clear, and stars began to appear, twinkling like distant lanterns across the vast expanse. Clara brought a blanket, and they sat together by the fire, the warmth of the flames blending with the warmth of their closeness.
Do you ever think about what brought us together? Clara asked softly, her eyes reflecting the firelight.
Henry smiled, remembering the first day she had arrived, the audacious line she had spoken, "You paid for me, now do it." "I think about it often," he admitted. Who would have thought that a bold remark like that would lead to this? To all of this? Clara laughed lightly, a sound that carried both amusement and affection. "I didn't think I'd ever belong anywhere. I just wanted to work, survive, and maybe earn a little respect. But I found so much more. And you've changed too. You're not just a man of the ranch anymore. You're a man who can share life with someone." Henry felt a lump in his throat. He had spent years believing that independence meant solitude, that life was measured only by work and routine. Yet Clara had shown him that independence did not have to mean loneliness, that strength could be paired with companionship, and that life could be richer when shared.
As the weeks turned into months, they continued to build their life together.
They repaired fences, planted crops, cared for the animals, and managed the ranch as a true partnership. Each day brought new challenges, but each challenge strengthened their bond. They celebrated small victories: a calf born safely, a fence completed without error, a crop thriving, and they comforted each other during setbacks, sharing both the burdens and the rewards of life on the ranch. One morning, as the sun rose over the fields, Henry approached Clara with a small, carefully wrapped package.
I wanted to give you something, he said, handing it to her.
Rafted, revealing a simple silver locket. She opened it to find a tiny picture of the two of them, taken during one of their first days on the ranch. Tears filled her eyes as she looked up at him. Henry, it's beautiful.
I.
Henry took her hand. You don't need to say anything. They seem to be something more wrong.
I just want you to know that I'm yours. Completely. We've built something together, and I want to continue building it every day with you by my side. Clara smiled through her tears, holding the locket close. I want that too, she whispered. That evening they walked through the fields together, the air fresh and crisp. The animals moved quietly around them, and the land seemed alive with the promise of spring. They talked about dreams, some small like planting a new garden, and some larger like expanding the ranch or helping the local community. Yet no matter the size of the dream, they knew they would face it together. As the weeks passed, the story of Henry and Clara became well known in the small town nearby. Neighbors and friends admired the partnership they had built, not just in work but in life. Many commented on how they complemented each other. Henry with his experience, strength, and steady nature, Clara with her intelligence, courage, and energy. Together they were a team respected and admired, yet quietly private, letting their work and love speak for itself. One evening, after a long day of planting and caring for the animals, Henry and Clara sat on their new porch bench, the sun setting behind the hills. But Clara leaned against Henry's shoulder, then he wrapped an arm around her.
You know, she said softly, I never thought life could be like this.
I thought I'd always be searching, always moving, never belonging anywhere. But now, I feel like I'm home. And it's more than a place. It's you. It's us. It's everything we've built together. Henry kissed the top of her head gently. I feel the same, Bostic. He glances around in desperance, and the color of tar he glances around in despost. But you've made me see that life is richer when shared, that love and work can grow together, and that trust is the strongest bond of all. As the stars appeared in the night sky, Henry and Clara sat together quietly, listening to the soft sounds of the ranch, the gentle lowing of cattle, the whispering of the wind through the trees, and the distant hoot of an owl. The world felt vast, yet safe and familiar. They had found something rare, a true partnership, a shared life, and a love that was steady, enduring, and deeply satisfying. The seasons continued to change, but the bond between Henry and Clara only grew stronger. Each challenge they faced, storms, broken fences, newborn animals, and unexpected hardships, was met together. Each success, each small joy, each quiet moment of laughter and companionship became a thread in the tapestry of their life. In the evenings, they often walked hand in hand through the fields, watching the sunset, reflecting on the day and planning for the future. The ranch, once a place of solitary work, had become a home, full of warmth, love, and the steady certainty of companionship. And as the years went on, Henry and Clara continued to build their life together, side by side, with the land, the animals, and each other as their constant companions. They had faced challenges, weathered storms, and grown together, learning that life's richest rewards came not from solitude or work alone, but from trust, partnership, and the quiet, enduring love they had discovered in each other. The ranch thrived, and so did their love. And every time Henry looked at Clara, whether she was mending a fence, feeding the animals, or simply smiling in the sunlight, he was reminded of the day she first arrived, bold and fearless, saying, "You paid for me, now do it." And now, decades later, he realized that those words had been the beginning of everything, the start of a life, a partnership, and a love that would endure. steady and true for the rest of their days.